Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Landscapes. Hope you guys are well. Now, I'm just sat here at home before I take you out on location because I just wanted to say a couple of things before we get started. Now, on the video that you're going to see, you're going to hear me mention that I've just been to Cooper's Hill, and that was the video that you would have seen prior to this one. Well, obviously it isn't, and that one will be coming out, but the reason that I decided to release this one first is that this is the one that I've asked you to edit the raw image from, because I felt the raw image was probably a little bit different and something that was worth editing more than the one from Cooper's Hill. So that's the first thing. Secondly, thank you so much for everyone who's entered or sent me their edits. It was a tough one, wasn't it? Because looking back on it, it's probably not the best of photos, really. Unfortunately, I probably would have. One probably would never have made it past Lightroom. I probably would have just looked at it and gone no. But because I recorded a video on it, and because I offered it out to you guys, I thought I better put an edit in, better put a video out. So videos coming up, and then we'll discuss the edit afterwards. So if you would have watched the previous episode of Everyday Landscapes, you would have seen that I was on Cooper's Hill, which is just outside of Ampshill. Now, this is the pathway that actually leads up to Cooper's Hill. And if you can see, my car is literally parked just over there. I don't know if you can just see it off there behind those trees. So I'm very, very close to the roadside here. But I saw this on the way up, and I thought I must stop and do this on the way back and do a very quick Everyday Landscapes video for you. So basically what we've got here, we've got this avenue of trees. I think they are, I'm going to go with beech trees because they've still got some of because beech trees tend to hold on to their leaves a bit longer. So I could be wrong, but I think it's an avenue of beech trees. And then you've got a few trees on the other side. And then you've got this puddle because we've had a lot of rain recently. You've got this puddle that's leading quite a long way up the path. So what I thought was, well, perfect, puddle reflections. Let's get some of the trees in the reflection, some of the sky, and a nice little vanishing point down the end where you've got like the end of the tunnel of trees. So that's essentially what I'm taking here today. So there's a couple of considerations for this image. One was the height of the tripod. I want the tripod reasonably low down because I want to elongate this puddle as much as I can and get it in as much of the frame as I can. By bringing it up, I'm going to have a lot less or a lot more in between the end of the puddle, if you like, and the little point at the end, which is kind of where your eyes are going to be led to. So by dropping it down, you're going to elongate that puddle, have it in as much the image as possible. And then I could go further, I could drop all the way down, but I think I want a little bit of mid-ground in there, and then off into that little light at the end of the tunnel. So that was one consideration. Another consideration is the focal length. So if I come out too much, so at the moment I'm shooting at about 50 millimeters, just under 50 millimeters. And if I were to come out to 24 millimeters, I'm going to get way too much either side of this avenue of trees. And also I'm going to start introducing a lot of sky in. Now I know there's some bright highlights in the actual puddle itself because it's reflecting the sky, but kind of that's where I want to keep them to. I don't want them so much anywhere else. And even though I'm still getting some at about 50 mil, I can clone those out possibly, or I can crop down a little bit just to avoid those. And the final consideration, well, actually, there's probably two more considerations. One is the angle, because where I'm stood, so if you can see behind me here, I've got this avenue of trees. Now, the other side of that is the rugby club, and there's cars parked in there. So if I were to come further over, although that wouldn't really work because then I wouldn't be looking down the line of the puddle anyway. But if I were to come further over, let's say the puddle wasn't there and I just wanted to take the avenue of trees, I come further over, I'm going to start introducing cars in the gaps between the trees, whereas coming further to the right eliminates that issue. I don't get any of those cars in. And the final one is the polarization. So I've got the polarizer on here, but I need to work out exactly how much I want to polarize it, because in this instance, I want the reflections in the puddle. I want the reflections of the sky, so I don't want to have it fully polarized. Well, I'm quite pleased with that. So let's get that home and get it edited and see if we can make a nice photograph out of that, shall we? Well, here we are back at home. And as I said previously, or at the very beginning here, this is probably one that would have stayed on my hard drive and not really seen the light of day if it wasn't for this video. But I hope you can see what drew me to the shot. I mean, it's got all the facets of a good image. You know, it's got the lovely reflections. It's got a nice avenue of trees. It's got a little bit of light at the bottom. But then overall, the light wasn't great. The puddle shape isn't really conducive to getting a really nice shot. It's a bit messy in the puddle, and you know, there's several things that kind of detract from this image. But seeing as you guys, or some of you guys, have been kind enough to do an edit for me, I thought it'd only be right that I did an edit myself and put the video out. So let's have a look at how I'm going to approach this. So here we can see we've got the raw file. As you recall, I was a little bit lower down because I wanted to get some of the, or more of the reflection, and I also wanted to cut out some of the midground. If I was a bit higher up, we'd have had less of the puddle and more of the midground. As it is, I probably could have got even lower, to be honest with you, if the old knees had been working, but it is what it is. So this is the original raw file. Let's have a little look at the basic edits to see what I did very first off. So here we are with the basic edits, and as you can see, I've cropped it down because there was far too much puddle in the foreground and it kind of had a weird shape to it. So, you know, the foreground interest is really important, and that puddle in the foreground is really important, but equally as important is capturing that row of trees, especially on the right-hand side, and getting that nice little vanishing point as well. So without that, or with that less prominent, I don't think it was quite as strong an image. So I've cropped it down from the bottom, and I believe a little bit from the top. Yeah, just to get that. And as you can see on the right hand side, there are my sliders there, just some basic edits, just a little bit to bring out some interest. Now the next thing that I wanted to do with this before I did anything else in Lightroom was to go into Photoshop and to make some edits to the actual image, which you'll see next. So disclaimer here, in Photoshop, I did do a little bit of cheating. Hands up, I'm sorry. But it's my image at the end of the day. I'm not entering it into any competition. And to be honest with you, I just wanted to make it look a little bit better, shall we say. So let's head into Photoshop here and I'll show you exactly what I've done. Now, the main thing that I've done here, which I really felt was critical to this image, is to do something with this puddle. So if I turn on the layer, you can see that I've expanded the puddle in the foreground across the right hand side and the left hand side. So if I just turn it off again, you can see that's as it was and that's as it is. You know, I've just added a bit of water, that's all. I could have just, you know, got the old hose out and just filled the puddle up a bit, that's all. And I did that using Content Aware Fill. Now, as you can probably see over here on the left hand side, it's not done the best of jobs. It's, you know, that looks a bit odd, but as it's a reflection, I don't really think it's that noticeable. So we're not going to get too stressed about that. And then it's done a reasonably good job over here on the right hand side. And following on from that, I just wanted to tidy up the puddle a little bit and some of the surrounding areas. So I'll show you what I did there. So if we just turn the layer on here, you can just see what I've done basically is there's a little area here, which let me zoom into it so you can see what I'm talking about. This area here. Now, if I turn it off, you can see where there's sort of horrible, nasty branch across there that didn't look great. And if I turn it back on, I've removed that. Again, Content Aware Fill, it's done a reasonable job. It's so small in the image, you're not going to notice any imperfections. And there are a few other little areas that I've messed about with, which I believe are just over here on the trees on the right hand side. So if you just focus on that right hand side there for a moment, let me zoom into that again so you can have a look. I've just closed up some of those highlights, but only a small amount. And I will say I did consider doing something with all of these highlights on the sort of top left, but it's virtually impossible really to cover those over because they're an integral part of the image, because all of the reflections on the bottom left are reflecting the sky on the top left. So if I were to like basically clone those out and get rid of them, it's going to look really odd that you've got the reflections in the bottom but you don't have the reflections at the top. So I decided to keep those in. I also did a little bit of work over on this right hand side, so if I turn it back on, you can see there I've just closed off a little bit of the light at the top corner on the right hand side. So that's without it and that's with it. And then after that, it was time to export it back into Lightroom to do a bit more editing. So here we are back in Lightroom, and as you can see here, this is the image just saved back into Lightroom. And then what I'll do is I'll show you what I've done for the next stage, which is essentially just to crop it even more. So I've pulled even more off of the bottom to make it a bit more of a square crop. It's not quite square, but I needed to leave that little bit in the first place just so I could edit the water. And then looking at it, I decided just to pull that up a little bit more to make it a bit more square, to bring everything a bit closer to you. So next up was to add in a linear gradient and a radial gradient. The linear gradient came in from the bottom, as you can see here. And what I've done with that is I've just added a little bit of clarity and a little bit of texture. Also added some contrast and dropped the highlights and the whites a bit, so it's just darkened down that foreground a little bit. And then with the radial gradient, as you can see here, it's quite a large radial gradient. What I've done with that is I've pushed the exposure up, so I'm kind of making that light at the end of the tunnel a little bit more obvious, and to try and draw your eye to it, because for me I can see there's 2 points here that are kind of fighting each other at the moment. You've got this light at the end of this avenue of trees, and you've also got this light up in the top left hand corner here, which is affecting everything. So the idea of that was essentially to just bring that up a little bit. So I've pulled up the highlights on that, and I believe I've also added a little bit of dehaze in there as well, so I've softened it down, kind of given it what I hope might be a little bit of a misty feeling just off into the background there. Following on from that, I've added a vignette in. As you can see here, I've just vignetted it, and I've also done a little bit of split tone in here. So what I've done is sort of the classic split tone really, which is sort of pulled up the highlights and the mid tones into that sort of beigey browny sort of effect, and pulled the shadows down into the opposite direction to a more bluey effect. So if I show you a bit of a before and after with that, so there's the before and there's the after, and you can see that's done quite a lot to the image. Actually, it's changed the image quite considerably, in my opinion, the feel of it. Looking at it, I wonder if I went a bit overboard with the split toning, but never mind. We'll work with that. And then the final act, which is, you know, often what I do finally when I'm just finishing off an image, is just to tone it all back down. So if we just go into here, this is the toned down final image. And what I'll do is, again, is I'll show you a bit of a before and an after. So that's the before, with it very, very contrasty, punchy and saturated, which I probably felt was a bit too much, although looking at it now I quite like it. And then that's the after, where I've just toned everything down, pulled it all back a little bit, just dropped the saturation slightly, dropped the contrast. Do you know, it could probably do with a little more, so I'm going to give that a little more now. So I'm just going to push that slider up, the vibrant slider, and give it a little bit more contrast. I think about there. Yeah, and that's our final image. So there it is. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed that image, and I hope that you enjoyed the process of getting to that image. Don't go anywhere just yet, because like I said, there's going to be a few other interpretations of this image coming up at the end. Thank you so much to everyone who sent me their versions. I really, really appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, that is a true everyday landscape there, because, under normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't have even touched that on Lightroom. I'd have probably looked at it and gone, oh, no, I'm not sure. That one probably didn't work. And I'm sure we've all been there. We all take several shots when we're out, and some of them don't make the grade. But actually, forcing yourself to edit that is quite a good learning process. And, maybe I've brought out a slightly better picture than what I first thought was there. So it's all very beneficial. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week from Cooper's Hill, probably, which was, before this one chronologically. But before I go, please stick around and enjoy these images.